If you click off this video, you will fail your test. Number one prerequisite to efficient studying, it's focus. So if you can't even focus on a 10-minute video, you're fucked for your test. I took an entire semester of experimentation to find this method. And you're not going to hear conventional advice because it's all shit when it comes to studying. Last semester, I got a 95 average without taking notes and without doing any homework. This is my method that I've used for chemistry and math. Now the key thing I want you to realize is I emphasize all in on studying less. A 95 average isn't even that good when it comes to comparing against the top of the class, like 99 or fucking 100, right? But think about it. I don't take notes. I don't do homework. This is so fucking unconventional. And the thing is, 95, it's bad compared to the top, but it's better than most people, right? This is why I stand out from most people. So this is the first part of my framework that cuts out literally 90% of how much you need to study just by this part. So let me give you an analogy, right? Imagine if the teacher gave you the test questions a day before you actually had the test. So you now had every single test question on the test tomorrow. How would you study? Would you study by reading the textbook? Or would you actually study based on the fucking test because you have every single fucking question, right? Of course we'd study based on the test because that would just cut out, like, see how much fucking time that would cut out? Like 90% of it? Well, we can replicate this without actually knowing the test questions. And the reason why it cuts out so much time is because this is the concept of knowing what you need to know. When we know what we need to know, we cut out 90% of what we need to study. Because most of what we study is actually useless when it comes to getting marks in the grade, right? If you only had to study, you would study exactly what would be on the test. But if we don't know what's going to be on the test, there are methods of finding out what most likely will be on the test. Here are 3 methods which you can use to find out what you need to know for a test. Number 1, it's finding someone who already did the test and asking them what was on it. This one's obvious. Number 2 is past test papers. But I think most people don't have that luxury. So this is what most people, including me, will use. Number 3, textbook unit questions or test review. Now you might be thinking, well, these are actually kind of going to be a little bit far off from the test, right? Well, maybe the closest one would be someone who already did the test. But even still, some of the questions would be changed. Past test questions, a lot of them might be changed. And also textbook unit questions or test review, of course, they're going to be different from the actual test, right? But the thing is, let me ask you this. What better way is there to find out what's going to be on the test other than unit summaries or past test papers? Can you name one better way to find out what's going to be on the test? It's not even just that. Practice questions are just so fucking broken. You know why? First of all, they replicate the test structure. They're just questions. If you took notes, when you study by taking notes off the textbook, what you're really doing is just practicing for taking notes. You're just getting better at taking notes. When you read off your notes, you're just getting better at reading off your notes. But when you do practice questions based on the unit, you get better at doing practice questions based on the unit. So that's pretty much just getting better at doing the test. Does that make sense? It's not only that. Imagine you were a textbook manufacturer and you knew the essential information in your units, but you needed a way to make sure the reader knew it. What would you do? You would test them on them, right? You would put questions based on the essential information in the unit questions, right? So when we do practice questions of any kind, but specifically textbook unit questions, we are tested on the essential information in everything. So this cuts out so much fucking time when we realize that these questions actually test us on exactly what we should be taking out from the unit. And also, test questions use this method called active recall, which is literally the most broken method when it comes to memorizing anything. Any memorization method that uses active recall, which is pretty much just taking information out of your brain is literally one of the best methods, guaranteed, because this method is hard, and simultaneously it, based on the neurochemistry and like whatever, it just works with the brain well, so it will reinforce that memory the best way possible versus putting information in your brain. Active recall is just broken, okay? Just because practice questions test you on the essential information that they want you to know, like the teacher or the textbook manufacturer, that just proves exactly why you should be doing it. Like, imagine how much fucking time you save, bro. You could be reading 20 pages. The textbook questions not only give you exactly what is essential in those 20 pages, but also test you on it. Do you see why practice questions are so fucking broken? It's because you can be reading 20 pages in a textbook, but the practice questions not only summarize those 20 pages in 2 pages, but also give you perfect practice questions which replicate the test structure. So that was finding out exactly what you need to know. Now let me give you another analogy. Imagine I told you to cook 10 eggs and all of them were in separate bowls. But in bowl 3, bowl 5, and bowl 7, those eggs were cooked. Now would you be brain dead and cook all the eggs from number 1 to number 10? Like not even like knowing that number 3 and like number 5, like those eggs were cooked, but you still fucking put it in the pan? No, because it's pointless to cook an egg that's already cooked, right? Unless you wanna like change the flavor or some shit, right? So, but this is the same exact concept when it comes to studying. People don't realize it's fucking pointless to learn what you already know. And yet we waste so much time doing it. Going back to practice questions, this is why they're so fucking broken as well, right? If I gave you a list on exactly what you need to know for the test, it'd be hard to find out exactly what you need to know, right? Because you'd be reading it and be like, oh, I know that, because when you read it, it's hard to find what you don't know. But if I gave you questions, all you need to do is read it. And if you can't fucking answer the question, then you don't know. So it's perfect for finding out exactly what we need to study, right? So the first step is just doing each question. And let me give you my advice. You probably know less than you think. There's a faster method to doing these questions too, and it's just to visualize them, almost like you're doing mental math. So for example, for chemistry, if there's like a word question, it's pretty easy to visualize. You just say the response and put out, like, visualize exactly what you can put on the page, right? But when it comes to something like stoichiometry, it's going to be way harder because you have to put in exactly the format that the teacher wants. And I actually made that mistake. I thought that I could just visualize the stoichiometry question. And as a result, I made mistakes that I thought I already knew on the test. So if you can't visualize exactly like 100% of what you're going to put on the page, then just do the fucking question. But unless you really don't care or if you're really low on time, then that's the last resort. Now, once you get to a question that you can't solve, do not look at the solution. Look at the solution of a similar question and use that to solve the current question you're working on. And this just makes it harder, like more cognitive load, which makes you memorize the solution and how you're going to do it easier. And this just saves so much more time. Like when you look at the solution, you're probably not going to remember it. Do you remember the last time you looked at a word and just forgot it in 5 seconds? Yeah, looking at the solution won't help you. You have to solve it yourself. And what this does, it makes your brain realize, oh, this specific thing that I'm learning is actually important because I'm applying it to the real world. And this is also another tip to get through these questions faster, and it's to skip repetitive questions. Do you know in those like fucking math textbooks, it would be like 1A, B, C, all the way to fucking F, bro. Sorry, all the way to fucking Z, bro. Like, what the fuck? Why are you testing me so much on the exact same concept? Just skip those questions because you should skip all questions that you already know you know. And how you know? You done a previous question on it. So if you do the first question and literally every single question preceding that is literally the exact same thing, then what the fuck is the point? Because you already know how to do them, right? So when it comes to repetitive questions, just do the hardest possible ones. And you will notice, like, a lot of these textbook questions, they actually repeat. So you don't even need to do every single one. You can just do the hardest ones. But make sure you know what you actually fucking know. Like if they're actually the exact same. If they change a little bit, I still suggest like visualizing or something, because you're probably gonna lose that mark. This is literally the exact essential information you need on the test. Don't skip through 90% of it. Like this is literally the fastest possible method to know exactly what you need for a test, okay? And let me repeat, the point of this is actually to find out your mistakes. The point is to find out which questions you're fucked up on and then do those. So then this is literally finding out exactly what you'd fail on an actual test. You're pretty much doing practice tests, like you're pretty much cheating. You're literally just doing different versions of the test beforehand, right? So the point is to find out what your mistakes are and then fix those right now. But there are going to be some questions where you really are fucked and you really don't know the solution. So this leads me to the second step of my framework. So that literally right there was my first step, scoping the subject. And how you do this is you find out what you need to know through just knowing where the fucking questions are, like the practice questions are, and then finding out what you don't know, which is pretty much just doing the questions and seeing which ones you fuck up on, right? That right there literally cuts out 90%. Like, compare that to fucking reading the textbook. Compare that. Like, compare that right now. 20 pages of textbook or 2 pages of questions. Do you see what I mean by this method is just so fucking broken? Just right there. This is the first step of the framework. You've already cut out 90% of the information that you need to study. And not only that, you know exactly, pretty much exactly what's going to be on the test. Unless your teacher doesn't test you on the textbook questions, right? But then most likely she'd have some like sort of homework or test review that you can actually scan and see like what you don't know. Those questions are testing you on exactly the essential information you need to know. And just looking at it, just scoping the subject to save you literally 90% of the time instead of scanning it yourself. The next step in my framework is filling in the knowledge gaps. So once you went through each question and you really find out what the fuck you're fucked on, you actually don't need to skip to the very end. Like you don't need to do every single question. When you find out a question you really are fucked on, like you just don't know how to do it, there's a few methods you can actually learn from that mistake, right? Number one is literally just using the textbook or fucking Google or ChatGPT. Just search it up. But keep in mind, when you use the textbook, only read for what you're looking for. So let me give you an analogy. Remember the last time you doom scrolled? How much did you actually learn from that? For an hour, you probably learned like 2 or 3 things, right? Now, if I told you to Google search a question that I gave you, how much could you learn in the first 5 or 10 seconds? You'd probably learn more, specifically tailored like knowledge to a question. Come in Google, like when it asks you the Google search, compared to doom scroll, which is like so like varied and like random pieces of knowledge, right? That is way better. And not only that, you literally got it in 10 seconds compared to an hour, right? So this is my analogy when it comes to textbook reading. Do not read the textbook. Use the textbook like Google. When you read the textbook, you're literally just scanning like pages of knowledge, which is all like random and scattered. Even if it's structured, there's no point because you're gonna pick up so little compared to when you have a specific question you can ask it. Use the textbook like a Google search. When you have a specific question that like specifically, like you have one specific practice question that you don't know how to do, that's when you use the textbook. That's when you read the textbook, because you will learn so much more specific advice when you have specifically a question you're trying to look for in the textbook. And I'm not just talking about the textbook. This also applies to the lesson notes or whatever notes you made yourself. This is why you can cut down on so much more time when you just focus on the questions first, find out exactly what you need to know, then you dive into those information sources. You just cut out so much time, bro. But now you might be thinking that you won't get 100% just because you did only a few questions. Like the studying time was reduced so much, and even though you're getting tested on the essential information, there must be something you're missing, right? And I'm gonna be honest, yes, you won't get 100%. This method skips over so much non-essential information, and fucking idiot teachers will test you on non-essential information just a little bit. But think about how much ROI this method brings. You probably got at least, if you study for like 30, 40, or like 45 minutes, you can probably aim to get a 95, like guaranteed, just because you studied the essential information. There's gonna be some stupid ass non-essential information on the test which you're gonna fail on, which is fine, right? And let me give you the alternative. Let's say you already know around this period of time when you went through my framework that you can get a 95 by studying like 30 minutes or something, right? What's the alternative? After this, you go and read the textbook to get all the non-essential information you want, just to get a fucking 5% more. But how long would that take? 2, 3 hours? Are you willing to do that? Let me show you a chart just to get this point in. So on the y-axis, there's what you need to know. And on the x-axis, it's what you don't know. So what I've done in the first step is the scope exactly what is essential, which is pretty much what you need to know and what's going to be on the test and what you don't already know, right? And what we do is the most efficient possible study method, which is practice questions. Now, this graph is not the scale, it's actually more like this, right? Because we cut out 99% of information, or like more like 90% that we don't need to study. But the thing is, there's still information that we need to know that we don't know, but it's like not essential. And this is where listening in class is actually better, or like best. I argue that there's no point of spending time reading the textbook for this pieces of information, because you're just going to enslave yourself to like 2 or 3 hours of studying. Rather, just listen in class, get as much as you can, and just don't give a fuck about the last 5%, okay? How do I know it's around 5%? Well, actually, a few weeks ago, I actually experimented with not listening in class. I literally tried not listening in class to see how much my marks dropped. And they actually dropped around 5%. So I still use this study method. But that little bit of non-essential information that the practice questions will skip over, it's around 5%. So like, is it really worth it to read a fucking textbook for 2 or 3 hours to get 5%? Now you might be thinking, this method is so fucking hard. It's because you're literally just doing different versions of the test you're about to do. And you're right. The reason why it's hard is also the same reason why it's so effective. Let me give you an equation to explain this point, right? Knowledge gained equals time studied times efficiency. So if we just straight up demolish all our time studying to like less than 30 minutes, we're gonna have to pump up our efficiency so fucking much. And whenever we do that, it gets really fucking hard. So you see, when it's hard, it's actually a good sign that we're actually studying efficiently. And this is the why this study method, when it's hard, it's actually a good thing. The final thing you might be thinking is that even though you know exactly what you do, you can't focus. And guess what? Focus is a skill, and it took me 1 full semester to master it. I don't use this method with Pomodoro technique or some shit, right? What I do is just pretty much optimize for flow states. So flow states is pretty much where you're in the flow of like doing an activity where you don't really think about anything in your brain and you're just doing it. And I argue that's where you're at your optimal state of like workflow. Flow states is also another skill. The more flow states you have, the longer they are, and also the more efficient they are. So pretty much it's a very similar skill to focus. Now I pretty much optimize for maxing out my flow states. I study until my brain is fried. And when my brain is fried, I can tell, like I can't even read the fucking words on my screen. That's when you know the flow state is over. So pretty much my study method is pretty much, you do the questions, you feel your brain in a flow state until your brain is fried. Now I actually take a break. So the thing with flow states is you ease into it like you're sleeping. Like when you sleep, you don't constantly think, I gotta sleep until you fall asleep. No, it just happens, right? And flow states will just happen to you. So when your brain is fried, that's when you take a break for 5 to 10 minutes. And at this point, bro, do not fucking hyperstimulate yourself. Boredom is the best thing to do when you're bored. Literally just close your eyes and like sleep like for 5 to 10 minutes. Like be a fucking weirdo, because that's what gets you results. Boredom increases dopamine, which increases motivation and focus. So like this is the best possible way to rest your brain. Just close your eyes and sit back and like be a fucking weirdo. You want weird results, you gotta become a fucking weirdo, okay? Now this study method, it took me one entire semester to not only find but master. So if you're not getting the results, it's probably because you have to focus more, or you have to feel out what really is essential. So I'll summarize my framework again. So first thing I do is I scope the subject. So to cut out 90% of what I need to study, I find out what I need to know and what I don't know. So to find out what I need to know, I just scope through past tests, textbook questions, or unit test reviews, or just ask people if when they already did the test, what the questions were, which pretty much tests you exactly on the essential information. Like, I can't tell you this enough, bro. That is the most broken fucking thing. Okay? Now, when I get the test questions, I find out what I don't need to know by just literally just doing the questions, bro. It's that simple. And then also, I study in flow states. That is the best method that I know to study